Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Welcome to my booktube channel. My name is Kat, and today we're doing something different. So if you've been on my channel before, you probably have a fairly good idea of the kind of books that I read. I like to dabble in kind of all genres, but there is one subgenre that I have never, ever read before. So for the very first time, I'm going to be doing a lengthy reading vlog, reading a dark romance book. So there's a couple reasons why I haven't read dark romance before. One, when I read the description of a dark romance book, my brain just goes like red flag, red flag, red flag, and it's not something that I'm super into. Now I can read characters that are morally gray, have issues, blah, 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 blah. Outright like serial killers, murderers, things like that. Not quite my type of man. And two, when I read the trigger warnings on these books, I'm not someone who's easily triggered. However, there are things that I'm like, well, yeah, no, I don't exactly want to read about that. So I've kind of steered away from dark romance, but there's so many dark romance books, and so many of them are very highly rated. So over the course of about the next week, I'm going to be reading Haunting Adeline, and we're gonna see what I think. This is going to be a very in-depth reading vlog, so I'm going to try not to give spoilers that will make this book unreadable for you if you haven't read it, but I do want to include my full reactions to the content and really talk about like the pros and cons of reading this kind of book as someone who's not into like the fantasy of a dark romance. So let's go ahead and talk about what Haunting Adeline is about and what people tend to say about it. So first of all, it has a 3.96 rating on Goodreads, which is really good actually, and way higher than I expected. The 3.96 is really good for, I guess, the content. I wouldn't think that that many people would have enjoyed this book, but I guess if people are picking it up and they already like dark romance, then obviously they're gonna enjoy it more. Okay, so there's like no description you can find online. It's just some like poem that's supposed to describe the book. So from what I understand, this is the premise of the book. So we're dealing with 26-year-old Adeline, who has just moved into her deceased grandparents' mansion. It's like a manor, I guess is what she calls it. And this manor is like a very large Gothic inspired dark home. It's very like grand, big, but nobody's lived in it for like a year, so it's super like dusty and dingy and whatever. And while she's living in this home, she discovers that she has a stalker who I believe his name is Zaid, and she comes to fall in love with this stalker and they form a relationship. Another point of the plot is that Adeline's grandmother was murdered, and I believe throughout the course of this book we are trying to figure out who murdered her grandmother, and I think her grandmother also had a stalker, and that's like the parallel that's drawn between the two women who are very close to each other. So that's what we're getting into. I don't love stalker men, but that's what we're dealing with. So last night I did read the first 2 chapters of this book, and it is told in multiple POVs. So I wanted to read a chapter of the main character girl, Adeline. I don't know how I say that word. So I wanted to read Addie's point of view and Zaid's point of view to get a good idea of what kind of story we're dealing with. Sorry, they're doing yard work outside, so if you can hear that, just ignore it, please. So one of the problems that I'm having with this book so far is just how formulaic it reads, I guess, in terms of like fan fiction-y. So in the very first chapter, we meet Addie, and Addie, of course, hates her mom. Her mom never got along with her grandmother, and she's very upset that she's living in her grandmother's house. But Addie is super excited. She loved that house. She grew up in that house, and she's really excited to go back. Addie is an indie author, and she's made a name for herself doing that, so she's able to travel or whatever and not work, so living in that home is not going to be a problem for her because of its location. Addie has a best friend whose name I cannot remember right now, but something that I really don't like about romance books is that they tend to describe women in like 3 terms. So her best friend is described as a bombshell with dark brown skin, pin straight black hair, and a gold hoop in her nose. So in this first chapter, Addie attends a book signing, and not attends, it is her own book signing. And while she's signing books, she realizes that there is a man outside staring at her, and she's like captivated by the fact that he has like one black eye, one blue eye, and like a scar down the middle of his face. Like Addie goes on with her signing or whatever, and afterwards she goes out for drinks with her best friend, and while they're getting drinks, her best friend texts some guy from her phone and says vulgar things that I am not going to repeat right now, but essentially tells him like, come on over later. And so this guy comes on over, and while they're making out or whatever, there's a loud bang at the door, and this is kind of the first indicator that we get that there is a stalker involved, because when Addie goes to the door, there's nobody there, and then this guy gets very upset that nothing's gonna happen between him and Addie because now she's scared, and he punches a hole in the wall, says something else that's very vulgar but kind of funny because it's so ridiculous, and leaves. And that's chapter 1. So at the end of chapter 1, though, there is a letter from, I'm assuming, Addie's grandmother that says he gambled away all of her money, and that's the first hint that we get that something is happening in her grandmother's life. Moving on to chapter 2, this is where we get Zaid's point of view for the first time, and Zaid is torturing somebody because he is a child predator. From what I've read, that's kind of Zaid's purpose of his like torture and killing and stuff like that, is that he wants to get justice for children who have been victims. He ends up this guy, then he ends up going and walking around, and that's when he ends up outside the book signing, and we realize that Zaid is the stalker and the one who was looking at Addie. But that is where we're at so far. I can say the book is really fast-paced, and I like that we're like getting to the meat of the story pretty quickly. We're not dilly-dallying about the little details that nobody cares about right now. So I'm excited to keep reading and to see how this goes. Okay, so there's somebody in her house, and she just found a red rose on her counter while she's searching her house for this person. Call the police. Okay, so last we checked in, she had gotten a rose in her like living room from Zaid, who we now know like for sure Zaid is the stalker, and he is continuing to leave roses around her home. She's called the police, and the police have brushed her off, and now she's gotten a bouquet of roses at the front door. Finally, she got a note, and it said, "I'll be seeing you soon, little mouse." So that's his new nickname for her, is calling her Mouse. So she's freaked out, but not really, because she still won't leave her house and she's still perfectly content to stay there, which makes perfect sense to me. I mean, if someone was breaking into my house, I wouldn't care, you know? Also, to make a correction, it is not her grandmother who was killed and had a stalker, it's her great-grandmother. And what we're reading is journals that she found in the house, and they're still not that, like, informative. All we know is that her grandmother had this stalker, and then she decided that she liked him, and they had like kissed because she's super into her stalker and not her husband. So after all this, Addie's best friend Daya decides that Addie needs to go out to the club because they need to have a girls' night and get away from the house. And at the club, they meet this guy, and this guy is going to take them home. And so Addie and this guy, Arch, go home to the manor. And of course, Zaid is unhappy. Zaid sends her a text that says, if his hands touch you, they will be in your mailbox. And they hear a pounding on the door, similar to last time this happened, and goes outside. Arch does, to try and protect her. A few minutes later, Addie decides, let me go outside, and she steps outside and steps on a rose that is covered in blood. And Zaid says, basically, there's like a note or a text that says, I told you. Like, I don't make empty threats. It said something along those lines. We've also gotten more of Zaid's point of view, where he is killing more people, and we know for a fact now that he is only murdering child predators and people involved in human trafficking, and he has a whole organization that is dedicated to that. I'm about 20% done with the book, and so far, it's not that bad. It's like the content is not great, but the book itself is not bad. Good morning. I read some more last night, and I'm now at the 30% mark, so I want to update everybody on what's going on. At this point, Zaid and Addie have come face to face. Addie like ran up to him while he was in her yard and like pushed him in the chest, and he didn't do anything, and of course she thought that he was super hot and mysterious and beautiful and all that stuff. He's continuing to text her like creepy little mouse, I'm going to get you, and saying he's gonna punish her and stuff like that, and leaving roses everywhere. But the focus of the book has kind of shifted to solving her great-grandmother's murder. And as she's seeing more of these journals, she's figuring out that pretty much the person who killed her great-grandmother is the stalker. So I'm unsure why Addie isn't absolutely petrified about the fact that Zaid is stalking her, because he has murdered a man, presumably. He's murdered somebody for touching her, and he's stalking her, breaking into her home. He has hacked her security footage. He has said, if you go to the cops, I will kill them and you. Like, it's not good. And Addie still refuses to sleep anywhere that is not her home or get any sort of help. She has called the police a couple times, but they've basically been like, I don't know, sorry. I also think it's really funny that it's brought up that as a child, Addie's mother thought that she was a psychopath because she likes to be scared, and they make a whole point of being like, Addie never gets scared. It's a problem for her. She just keeps going, which is, okay, sure, you might like haunted houses, but do you like being stalked by murdering men? Because that's insane. One of my book pet peeves is books where the female main character is so insistent on coming across as confident and strong in a certain type of way that all they do is give the most like cliche, repetitive adjectives to describe her, because there's nothing less confident to me than the character saying every single page, like, I have a fat ass and great titties, because that is literally at least once a chapter, it is brought up that Addie has a really good ass. To the point where they're discussing the fact that Addie has nudes on her phone and she's worried that Zaid is going to hack into her phone and see them. And Addie's like, I don't even send nudes. I just like to look at myself naked. There's also a line where Addie says that her mom told her as a child that if you eat, it's all gonna go to your ass. And Addie's like, little did she know that's actually what I wanted. Be so for real, girl. Be so for real. I'm all for body positivity. You should love the way you look. But a character that is constantly harping about how they look does not come across as confident to me. And I'm glad that you want your stalker to see you naked. Sure, but get some help. Good morning, good afternoon. We need to talk about what I've read the past 24 hours. So where we last left off, Addie and Zaid had their first confrontation where Addie goes and pushes Zaid, but things have taken quite the turn. So when I read the trigger warnings for this book, I was pretty sure that I knew what I was getting myself into, and I knew that it wasn't going to be content that I loved. However, I was unaware of just how bad it was going to be. I don't want to say too much specifics because that's not my thing and that's not something I want to speak about. However, even if you read the trigger warnings for this book, I would never recommend this book to a single person because I think it's extremely irresponsible to put out content like this. I think it, no matter the trigger warning you give, it doesn't make the material acceptable. We get to our first encounter. Actually, there's been 3 encounters at this point with Addie and Zaid, and not a single one of them has been positive. And when I say not positive, I mean incredibly non-positive for Addie. I hope you can understand what I'm saying when I say that. But the way that it is discussed throughout the following chapters makes it very clear that the author knows exactly what they're doing. Addie says the words multiple times about what happened to her. So it's not like there's no excuse here. And I think that changing the rhetoric in these situations could have made such a huge difference. You could have had a book that had similar impact, similar storyline, almost exact storyline actually, and just changed a few sentences and you could have made it way more acceptable. Sorry, I'm editing right now and I want to add that when I say the storyline could have been the same, in the journals that she reads about Gigi, her great-grandmother, Addie reads that during this whole stalking sequence, Gigi comes to the conclusion that she wants him to break in and she wants him to kiss her and she begs him to kiss her and things like that. And I think that the author could have done the exact same thing and drawn even more of a parallel between Gigi and Ronaldo and Addie and Zaid. Zaid by doing something like that, but instead the author chose to make it different and chose to include the incredibly graphic, awful scenes that I am describing here. And that's why I say that I think it could have been made the same, but that the author made the choice to not do that. And I think that's irresponsible. I think the author chose to be incredibly irresponsible and decided to create a storyline that is harmful to women in general and disgusting. I'm going to finish reading this book because I've put my time into it and I want to make this video and continue talking about it, but I am absolutely disgusted with this author. This is a 0-star book for me. No matter what the rest of this content is, it is a 0-star book for me, because the idea that something can happen to a woman and it can be terrible and awful, but her body just reacts differently is fucking disgusting. It's not cute. It's not entertainment. It's not a fantasy. It's gross. It's terrible. It's harmful. And I don't care what trigger warnings you put on something. There are some things that no matter what you're warning somebody about, you just shouldn't do. And I think that this is one of them. Not to brush that off, but putting that aside, those first 2 or 3 encounters are exactly everything I just talked about. Moving forward, Zaid is continuing to work with his organization to stop child trafficking. And he is specifically looking to catch these 3 businessmen, senators, politicians who are involved in a specific thing that he saw that he's trying to stop. So he is trying to get close to this man so that way he can kind of learn his habits, lure him in, and find the best way to eliminate him. And Addie is seen in public, and in order to try and protect her, Zaid kind of brings her into it. So this man supposedly knows about Addie's great-grandmother's murder, so Addie is interested in talking to him. His name's Mark. So Addie's interested in talking to Mark. Mark says, like, I can give you more information if you come to this party that I'm having. So Zaid and Addie attend the party, and at this point, it is kind of alluded to the fact that Addie is now in danger because first, this man Mark is now aware that Addie is kind of a target for him. He thinks she's a beautiful woman and he knows that she belongs to Zaid. That makes her like a higher, you know, how psychopaths are. Like, it makes her more desirable. And second, she is targeted by Arch's friends, that man that we spoke about earlier that Zaid got rid of for touching Addie. He was a very powerful person, so now his friends are after Addie because they think that she had something to do with why he was taken care of. So the relationship has changed. Now things are going the way that Addie wants them to, and they're going positively, we'll say. He is still creepy and disgusting and stalking her, but after she meets with Mark, Addie also discovers that her great-grandmother's stalker, Ronaldo, is most likely not the person who murdered her great-grandmother. So she's feeling some relief from that, but at the same time, she says that she kind of wanted him to be because she wanted a reason to dislike Zaid even more, even though there's plenty of reason. And I do have a lot of highlights from the book, and I'm probably going to include some clips of them just so you guys can see the exact like quotes that I am saying are making me have such strong feelings about this book. I'm gonna keep reading. Like I said, I'm about 60% of the way done, so I'd like to be done in the next 2 days. I'm not pushing myself to read this book that fast because I don't care about it. Like, it's not fun to me. Like, I'm never gonna read another book by this author. I'm not gonna read the second one. Like, I'm just doing this because I thought it was a fun experiment, and here we are. I am truly sorry for the lack of content of just like footage of me reading this book. I am trying to finish it and I'm just having such a hard time. I just don't like it. I'm 76% of the way through though, and I'm gonna try and knock it out tonight. I haven't read in like 2 days. I've just been putting it off. Oh, but we're almost there. Before anyone says anything, I know I need to brush my curls out. I'm about to go to work and I'm letting my curls fall so that way when I get to work, my hair is not straight again. We're just gonna pretend that that's not a thing. So last night I finished Haunting Adeline, and here is what happened in the last 25% of the book. So where we left off with Mark kind of preying on Addie, now Addie and her friend Daya have chosen to go to this haunted house fair thing. So it's multiple haunted houses. And this is really honestly probably the only part of the book that I actually enjoyed was Addie and Daya's experience at this haunted house. While they're there, they run into Mark, and of course he sees Daya as well and chooses to target the 2 women because he wants to extract them from the property and sell them into trafficking. Zaid is of course there as well because he's watching Addie, and also he wants to meet up because he knows that Mark is there, and Mark and the 3 other men that he is working on capturing because of the things that they were doing are all attending. So as Addie and Daya enter the house, Zaid is following them, and this performer for the haunted house notices. She's like dressed like a doll, and she steps in and takes Zaid and says she's going to kill him because he's preying on these girls, and she says her henchmen are going to help her, but clearly she has mental health issues and there's nobody there to help her. And Zaid basically says like, I'm not trying to hurt them, but there are men who are. So they end up capturing Mark and the 3 other men and tie them up and keep them in this room. So Addie and Daya are able to like get out. They kill all of the men after asking like, where is the next thing gonna happen, so that way Zaid can like infiltrate it. Zaid blames all of the murders on the girl's name is Sibby because he knows she has mental health issues and she was gonna kill him anyways, so he's like, whatever. He frames her for it, which I mean technically she was a part of it, but he was like the main one. And then we move on. Addie and Zaid now have this like happy relationship, and he's still like stalking her, and they kind of make jokes about it. And at one point he says, do you think that you are Gigi reincarnated? He's like, and am I Ronaldo reincarnated? So that's weird. And Addie says, I think you just like the idea of stalking me in multiple lifetimes, which is whack as hell. However, after this point, Daya finds out about the relationship, and Daya is kind of like, meh, which is terrible best friend behavior. Girl, you know what has been happening. You should not approve. You should be helping her and getting her to a therapist immediately. Daya comes to help them try and solve the remaining pieces of Gigi's murder. They find this little baggie with a watch and a bracelet covered in blood in it, and they're able to look up the serial number on the watch and the like blood. They're able to like do DNA testing, and they find out that it is Gigi's blood, and the watch belonged to Frank, Mark's father, who knew about Gigi's death. So it turns out that Mark's dad killed Gigi, which is weird. He basically killed her because he found out that she was cheating on her husband with Ronaldo, and Frank wanted her to cheat on her husband with him. So he was like, if I can't have you, nobody can. That's the situation with that. I forgot to mention, we also find out a little bit more about Zaid's backstory. And basically he says like, I don't have any problems. Like, yeah, my parents died, but like, it didn't bother me at all. Like, I don't know why I am the way I am, which is just perfect. We love an author who makes sure her characters are well developed. As we reach the end of the book, Zaid is going to infiltrate this place. It's called like Saviors or something like that. He's going into Saviors, and he is going to become initiated into their circle and then save the people that are being hurt. So in the process of the initiation, he plans on executing this like big old ordeal where he doesn't actually participate, steals the girl away and whatever. But there's like a huge explosion, and like a fake FBI like raid basically. So he grabs the girl and runs off, and then he gets like hit by shrapnel and injured, and then like his partner comes running in, and he's like, why are you here? And it turns out this whole thing was like a big setup, and he turns around and he sees the person who planned it all, but it doesn't tell you who it is, but it's very obvious, in my opinion, that it's Sibby. Maybe I'm wrong. If you've read the second book, you can let me know if I'm wrong, but I think it's Sibby because she's pissed that all this happened and she's a psychopath. And Addie is like driving because Daya has texted her and been like, I need help, I need help. So she's driving to go see her, and her car gets hit and she gets taken. And also in the next book, I know what happens is she is tortured, and like, you know, from what I've read in little reviews, people who even enjoyed the first book absolutely despise the second book because everything that I discussed being graphic and terrible and horrible about this first book is 20 times worse in the second book. And the second book apparently has no plot for like the first 50% of it. It's not a continuation really of like the story, I guess. It's like 50% no plot and just like gore, and then the other 50% is like something different, I guess. If you liked this book and are thinking about reading the second book, I guess I wouldn't recommend it, even though I've never read it. But if you think that this first book sounds bad, just know the second book is supposedly way, way worse. So I would not read it. Overall, you can check out my Goodreads linked below for my little mini review, but this book is a 0 stars for me. And I said that if I had $1 for every time Zaid talked about completing his mission and the kind of people that he wants to, but he was actually just talking about men exactly like him, then I'd have enough money to get this book taken away from the face of the earth, and I would do it. So that's how I feel about this book. I do want to remind everybody that everybody is entitled to their own opinions and tastes, and preferences and all that kind of stuff. And I am not shaming you or hating on you for liking the things that you like, just the same way that I probably like lots of things that you don't like. So if you enjoy this series and you like this author and this kind of book, I'm so happy for you, and I hope you keep reading it, and I hope you keep enjoying it. And the world we live in, there's a market for everything. So keep enjoying your books and I'll keep enjoying mine. And let's just ignore my opinion if you don't like it. I hope you guys enjoyed this vlog though. I did have a good time like filming it and doing this kind of style of reading vlog where I kind of like jump in. If you liked this video, please give me a thumbs up and please subscribe down below for more content like this and not like this. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. I will see you guys soon. Bye!